I prepared some notes here. So let me start this. Mayroon pala tayong community development, may philo, may other other disciplines. So maganda yon. At least we'll have a mix of insights. So again, thank you for inviting me here, Dr. Mendoza. This topic is also close to my heart and quite popular, actually. No, you must have. We all know by now what the community pantry is. You have seen it in your news feeds. It trended in Twitter. You probably have donated or volunteered, or maybe lined up. Mayroon man nag-line up sa atin in a nearby community pantry in your neighborhoods. And as you know, this is initiated by a very young woman, 24 ba or 26 years old, si Patreng non. And she started with just one simple, tiny cart or cabinet or shelf, ano ba yan? And from that simple beginning, it mushroomed in different parts of NCR and then eventually in the whole country. And it even reached Timor-Leste, outside of the Philippines. So I call this the community pantry as exercise of civic duty to participate in governance. As of now, last time I checked, there are now like 6,715. So ganun ka-exact, no? Replications of the community pantry started in Maginhawa. And it just started a month ago. So the question for me now here is, why did it go viral? Why did it become so almost phenomenal now, no? Some say it's born out of the Filipino sense of community and natural inclination to help others, to volunteer. Gaya ng nabanggit sa'yo ni Totoy, yung bayanihan. And this was actually the line of thinking, if you will, or the spin or the interpretation made by Malacanang, by the government. But a more critical position would say it's because of a need that the government fails to meet. So there's something lacking in the way the government is handling this pandemic. So it's about also government's incompetence, poor management, bad leadership in handling the COVID-19 pandemic. But some would also be very critical of the spread of the community pantry itself. On the one hand, they would say it has been done even before. Even at the start of the pandemic, there were already donation drive, but it did not become as popular as it is today. So bakit kaya? Bakit noon ginagawa na pero ngayon mas nag-click? Others would also say it's just another fad or passing fancy. Pinoy, di ba? Mahilig makiuso, kumbaga. Baka lilipas din ito. And some others would say it's actually a dole out and it may not be sustainable in the long run and will eventually fade away. So these are already some discourses. You probably are already aware of this around the community pantry. But this means that it's not really just a food program. It's beyond that. It already has many implications, both social and political. I don't know, maybe even some economic implications also. But in this discussion, I will look at the community pantry from the lens of governance, which is my field of expertise in a way. And as a development practitioner myself, I am particularly interested in community pantry as a form of participatory governance. Okay. So quickly, these are just our learning objectives for this discussion. So by the end, we should be able to see community pantries as a mode of participating in governance. And also, we should be able to identify ethical issues in exercising this duty of participating in governance. Actually, when I was thinking about this session, I was initially thinking of going hardline, presenting community pantries as an indication of the failure in governance. But later I decided I'll just simply characterize the community pantries in terms of the virtues of good governance, and thereby providing an example or model of how the government should have implemented its social amelioration program during the COVID-19, and probably it's just up to you to think or to infer or derive whether it's really failure in governance or whatever. Anyway, so let's have first a working understanding of governance. You see here Dragon Boat, and for your information, both your teacher and myself are paddlers, Dragon Boat paddlers. So this is an example close to our heart. So governance is about decision making, and this happens in a collective group. And steering in this situation, in a Dragon Boat situation, is an effective analogy for governance. You see in the slide, the steersman could also be a woman in the other picture. And he or she is the steersman is the one setting the direction of the water for the boat. So it's all about being able to make the boat move properly. That's the steering part, and that's actually the governance part. But how strong it is or how fast it will be, that will depend on the people themselves. And just to stick to the analogy, the steersman should not only have the skill in navigating the water, but must also have a feel, or should be able to go along the movement or behavior of the paddlers themselves. So that's one quick analogy for governance, so that we have a working understanding. This brings us to established attributes of saying, or attributes for saying what good governance is, or how a certain kind of governance becomes good. This is actually from the UN, United Nations. These are UN standards. And I will use this to analyze how the community countries provide a model for good participatory governance. So there are 8 of them here. You'll see here, accountable, that's owning up to your responsibility. In Tagalog, pag-ako ng pananagutan. You have here transparent, no secrets, meaning bukas ka or tapat. And then you have responsive, tumutugon sa pangangailangan, equitable and inclusive, nakabahagi, or pantay, or pwede sabihin na walang tinatangi, walang nadi-discriminate. You have here effective and efficient, meaning this is self-explanatory, epektibo, talagang kapaki-pakinabang, maliksi, or walang aksaya, efficient. And of course, it follows the rule of law, sumusunod sa batas, ayon sa batas, and participatory, like the example of the community pantry. It's not monopolized by anyone. Kalahok yung tao, gaya ng mga paddlers. Kalahok din siya dun sa movement ng bangka. And of course, it's consensus-oriented. Somehow similar to participatory, there's meeting of minds, so may pagkikita ng loob. And in this discussion, we'll see how the community pantry exhibits these characteristics, such that at some point it could actually become a counterforce movement against the government and its way of governing. Kumustahin natin, did the community pantries, or do the community pantries, even until now, really allow us to see what's lacking in current governance? And do they actually offer an alternative or complementary or better version of it, better version of governance through active participation? So let's start with the first, participatory. We say that the community pantries exhibit the participatory feature of good governance. We see it because community pantries themselves are inherently participatory. We feel the people's energy. And in governance discourse, we actually talk of exit or voice. I don't know if you've heard of this. Exit or voice. These are options for people who see problems in government. So if you had enough of the bad decisions and the troubles caused by government decision making, you either leave, that's exit, you look for a better government, another kind of government, or you voice out your issues and complaints. So that's feedback. But the government either listens to you or not. So even if the government doesn't listen and you don't choose exit, you don't choose to exit, so you stay, you may still try to assert more and get probably a megaphone so that you could have a louder voice. And in the case of the community pantry, we can view the initiative, these many initiatives that you see in the slide, no, being contributed by different people. We can see that we can view the initiative as voicing out frustrations over inaction. And that was also what Patreng Non herself said. She's frustrated already. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't, she feels that she's already paralyzed and really disappointed with what's going on. What else could she do? So she started the community pantry. And so it's actually voicing out rather than exit. She voiced out her complaints through a particular action in reaction to or in response to the government inaction. So these people who are participating in community pantries did not wait anymore for the government to act. They acted on their own and exercised their civic duty to be part of the solution. The community pantry, therefore, happened not because of the government, but despite the government. The Philippines has its unique history of vibrant civil society, and I'm myself, I'm part of that. It has a unique history of participation, especially after its people power, which I think makes us somehow inclined to start, to join, and support this kind of initiative. So participatory is not really new to us. Next, we also say that community pantry is effective and efficient. And there are good reasons for that. In a subtle way, it shows the government how to effectively relieve people of hunger amidst this pandemic. The simplicity of the idea, as you can see in this simple info sheet here, makes it very effective and efficient. Just look at this very straightforward four-step process on how to set it up. Just put your food and grocery supplies on the cart, and then let people who need them come and get their share. So there's no complex bureaucracy procedures whatsoever, and special management control is not needed. You just have to be introduced to a number of people, and then hopefully it could grow so big. But if it grows so big, then that's when you really have to introduce some protocols, perhaps some guidelines, such that just to avoid that it becomes uncontrollable. But if it's at the neighborhood level, then it should actually be manageable, and that's the ideal setting for that. The next characteristic here is responsive. So community pantries also, in this particular discussion, is showcased as mechanism for good governance. The community pantry clicked. I think it clicked because it's sensitive to people's needs. There's immediacy, there's urgency in the way it responds to them. And as you can see in this photo, innovation.
Sir Don, yung audio mo, parang ano?
Ay, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Ayan. Innovations also happen here, no? As you can see here, it could become mobile community pantry, which makes it even more responsive. I think the bottom line here is the ability to satisfy people's urgent needs. And as you can see in the statement from the president, I think he somehow failed to appreciate the value and importance of the community pantry based on the particular statements coming from him. Magbalot kayo ng pagkain, ibibigay sa inyo yan ng barangay, mga ganong klase. But that's not happening apparently, and that's why we had this community pantry. But perhaps, just perhaps, perhaps the president has another motive for saying this. We don't know. Another feature that is transparent. Transparency is an important feature because people see the donations and where the donations go, And some organizers would even go as far as publicly sharing their financial reports, as you can see here. It's probably not a common practice, but it's happening in some areas. And this is a good practice. People continue giving as it grows with all the accessible information about it. And perhaps one issue with previous similar initiatives, before we ask, why did the previous initiatives did not click like this? Perhaps there were donation drives before, but there was also distrust due to limited information on where the resources go and whether they were actually used properly. So therefore, the visibility and the accessibility of the community pantries themselves is its key strength. And it's, I think, part of its transparency. Next, it's equitable and inclusive. And this is, I think, quite obvious. The community pantries are equitable and inclusive. Everyone is welcome to contribute according to their capacity. And everyone, likewise, is welcome to come and get what they need. You may be a poor farmer or a senior citizen, or maybe a student, PWD, and even LGBT, or tambay even. Anyone who wants to give or needs anything could be part of it. So if there's anything or something that this initiative should exclude, if it has to exclude anyone, it has to be maybe the politicians who may have, other motive, selfish motive. That's political. Next one here is building consensus as another feature of good governance. And there also appears to be convergence of perspectives in the continued rise of the community pantries. It has built consensus around the need to address the problem collectively. It's not a simple act of charity, but mutual aid, as you can see here in this statement. And as I said at the start, there are still some objections and critical opinions against the community pantry, but of course that's normal. Consensus building is a process, and what's important is that people engage in the active dialogue on what it really means to us. And that's why the president's sharp opposition to it is highly suspect and actually not helpful and not constructive. Next is accountability or being accountable. Are community pantries accountable? Questions of accountability normally apply to authorities who are given power. So we're talking of a different kind of accountability in countries. And I think we've seen efforts to have self-checking perform somehow. But how do we hold volunteers accountable? Because they are volunteers, do we require them to spend like 8 hours? We cannot do that. It's really a different kind of accountability. Or in the case of Ingeloxin, was she accountable for the death of the person who lined up in her community pantry? And aside from, and more than these operational concerns of accountability, the community pantry should serve as reminders of who should really be held accountable. And in this case, it's really the government that should be held accountable for the proper delivery of needed services, especially in these times of hardship. So in a way, the example being made by community pantries is to really hold government accountable, or to remind them that you have a responsibility to do, and you may want to do it this way. I think this is second to the last. Following the rule of law. Oh, is it the last? The rule of law. And perhaps because of the popularity, probably because of the popularity of the community pantry, the organizers and the whole community pantry initiative itself had been red tagged. There's something to do, I think, with the rule of law, because it is related to the accusation that it may be illegal or going against the law. Its legality is questioned, and there were recommendations to actually regulate them. But what would be the implication? But as an exercise of the right to participate, the community pantries are all clearly legal. even if the communists are setting up these community pantries, they could not be faulted for it actually. It's not a crime to help other people, as Patrengnon said. And to reiterate, the community pantries are actually a legitimate exercise of the civic duty to participate in governance. The government is actually could be misusing or violating the law if it will continue to red tag community pantry organizers. So in closing, let me close with this two messages. After looking at the community pantry initiatives within the framework of the 8 characteristics of good governance, I won't enumerate them again anymore. I think we can say that the community pantries truly provide a critique of the current governance. It's a critique of how they perform. It's a critique of the way they have served the people. And the government, particularly the president, is reacting negatively to it, perhaps for a reason. Maybe we can have another discussion on that. But this exercise of the right and duty to participate in governance is always there, whether the government or the president likes it or not. How the communities will fare in the future is another big matter to discuss. Whether it will be sustained or not, whether the government should support or institutionalize it or not, or whether it will become a political counterforce movement. Some people are already saying that. These are all interesting discussion points. But what's important right now, and what I want to emphasize here in this discussion, is that the community pantries for good governance. It reflects aspirations for governance to be better and for civic participation to do more.
Don, yung audio mo.
Okay. Well, I hope you got that last part. I don't know.
Can you repeat it?
My audio.
Can you repeat the last part?
Well, the last part basically says that community pantries, for me at least, reflect the aspirations for good governance. And we need to hold on to these aspirations. And I think community pantries will always, remind us that these aspirations are necessary so that we can really be helpful and useful citizens of the country. So let me stop there and we can just have a discussion on things that probably struck you.